Vietnam's story is one of survival. A small nation that stood face to face with giants. China, the Mongols, France, the United States. One after another, empires came with armies, fleets, and firepower. And yet, Vietnam is still here, not just surviving, but thriving. This is not just history. This is the story of a nation that refused to die. This is the entire history of Vietnam. Long before Vietnam had borders, long before the name itself even existed, there was a legend. The tale of a dragon lord and a fairy goddess. The dragon, Lac Long Kun, and the fairy, Ao Ker, had 100 children. Half followed their father to the seas, half followed their mother to the mountains. And from those children, the Vietnamese people were born. The myth is more than a story. It tells us that Vietnam's people are both mountain and sea, both strong and adaptable. From the very beginning, unity was rooted in diversity. By 2800 BC, the Hung kings ruled the first kingdom of Van Lang. They were farmers and fishermen, carving rice fields into hillsides, living in stilt houses along rivers, and crafting bronze drums that boomed in ritual and war. These early people did not yet call themselves Vietnamese, but they laid the foundations of a culture: rice cultivation, ancestor worship, and village life. Traditions so strong they would outlast conquest after conquest. In 111 BC, the shadow of the Han Empire fell over Vietnam. China annexed the land, bringing new laws, taxes, and administrators. For 1,000 years, Vietnam was ruled by dynasties in Beijing. And yet, though power shifted, the people resisted. They clung to their language, their customs, their rice fields, their drums. They bent under empire, but never snapped. In the year 40 AD, two women changed everything: the Trung sisters. Widows of war, they rallied 80,000 rebels to their side. Mounted on elephants, they stormed citadels, driving out the Chinese rulers. For 3 years, they ruled as queens of an independent Vietnam. But the Chinese struck back. The sisters were defeated, their rebellion drowned in blood. Legend says they chose to leap into a river rather than be captured. To this day, they're remembered not as losers of war, but as eternal symbols of Vietnamese courage. Every child in Vietnam grows up knowing their names. The centuries rolled on. More uprisings, more conquerors, more defiance. In 248 AD, another woman, Lady Trio, rose in rebellion. She said, "I will not resign myself to the lot of women who bow their heads and become concubines." She too rode an elephant into battle. She too was defeated, and yet she too became immortal in memory. Vietnam's story has always been this: battles lost on the ground, but never lost in the heart. Finally, in 938 AD, came a turning point. Ngo Quyen, a Vietnamese general, lured the southern Han fleet into the Bait Dong River. His men had planted wooden stakes beneath the water, sharp and hidden. As the tide fell, the enemy ships were impaled. The fleet was destroyed, and for the first time in centuries, Vietnam was free again. Dynasties rose and fell. The Li dynasty made Hanoi their capital, building temples, palaces, and the foundations of Vietnamese governance. The Tron dynasty brought resilience. When the Mongols invaded, led by Kublai Khan, their empire stretched across Asia. They had crushed Korea, Persia, Baghdad. But Vietnam? Vietnam did not fall. 3 times the Mongols invaded. 3 times they were defeated. The Vietnamese burned fields, poisoned wells, and ambushed their enemies in jungles and rivers. At the Bai Dong River, once again, fire ships turned invaders into ashes. It was a warning to the world. Vietnam may be small, but it is never weak. In the 15th century, Vietnam once again fell under foreign rule, this time the Ming dynasty of China. But from the forests and mountains rose a man named Lê Loi. He was no emperor at first, just a leader of peasants turned fighters. For 10 years, he waged guerrilla war. Strike, retreat, strike again. The Ming armies could not hold. In 1428, Vietnam was free once more. Lê Loi became emperor, founding the later Lê dynasty. Under his reign, schools spread, Confucian values took root, and the land prospered.
But unity never lasted forever. By the 1600s, Vietnam was torn apart again. The Trinh lords ruled the north. The Nguyen lords ruled the south. 2 families, 1 nation, split in half. Civil war raged for centuries. The people longed for unity, and in the 18th century, they got it, briefly, through rebellion. The Tai Son brothers rose from peasant roots. They overthrew both Trinh and Nguyen lords, sweeping across the land like a storm. Their leader, Quang Trung, became a hero, defeating a massive Chinese invasion with brilliant tactics. For a moment, it seemed Vietnam would be whole, strong, unshakable. But Quang Trung died suddenly. The dream crumbled. In 1802, Nguyen Anh seized power, crowning himself Emperor Gia Long. The Nguyen dynasty ruled a united Vietnam once more. It would be the last royal dynasty the country would ever see. They built the imperial city in Hue, palaces of golden roofs and red gates. But behind the beauty was weakness. Beyond the horizon, a new threat was coming. By the mid-1800s, French ships appeared on Vietnam's shores. They came with cannons, armies, and ambition. Piece by piece, Vietnam was conquered until it became part of French Indochina. The French built railways, plantations, and Western schools. Saigon grew into a bustling colonial city. But exploitation ran deep. Rice, rubber, and coal were exported, wealth flowing not to Vietnam, but to Paris. Resentment grew. Patriots dreamed of freedom. Among them was a young man named Nguyen Ai Quoc. He would travel the world, study Marxism, and return with a new name, Ho Chi Minh. World War II shattered French rule. Japan occupied Vietnam, seizing its resources. But when Japan surrendered in 1945, Ho Chi Minh seized the moment. In Hanoi, he stood before a massive crowd and declared independence. Quoting the words of the American Declaration of Independence, he said, "All men are created equal. The Creator has given us certain inviolable rights, the right to life, the right to freedom, and the right to happiness." Vietnam was free. Or so it seemed. France returned, determined to reclaim its colony. But the Vietnamese were ready. The First Indochina War raged for years. It ended in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu, a valley fortress where Vietnamese troops under General Va Nguyen Giap besieged and defeated the French. The world was stunned. A European empire had been humbled by a small Asian nation. But the price of victory was division. The Geneva Accords split Vietnam into two: the north, led by Ho Chi Minh, the south, backed by the United States. Peace would not last. The Vietnam War, or as the Vietnamese call it, the American War, erupted. The North fought to reunify the country under communism. The South, with American soldiers, helicopters, and bombs, fought to resist. Villages were burned, forests destroyed with chemicals. Millions of civilians suffered. For 2 decades, the war dragged on, becoming one of the most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. And then, in April 1975, it ended. A North Vietnamese tank crashed through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon. The city fell. Vietnam was united once more, under one flag. But victory came with scars. The land was devastated, the economy shattered, millions dead. Isolation and hardship followed. And yet the same resilience that had carried Vietnam through centuries of struggle carried it through this too. In 1986, the government launched Doi Moi, that means renovation. Economic reforms opened markets, encouraged trade, and invited investment. Slowly, painfully, Vietnam began to rebuild. Cities grew, factories rose, rice fields fed not only the nation, but the world. Today, Vietnam is one of Asia's fastest-growing economies. Its cities bustle with life. Its people carry both ancient traditions and modern ambition. Vietnam's story is not just one of war, though wars shape every chapter. It is a story of survival, of a people who faced empire after empire and never surrendered. From the legend of a dragon and a fairy, to the Tring sisters who rode elephants into battle, to the generals who humbled empires at the Bac Dang and Dien Bien Phu, to the reunification after decades of war, Vietnam stands as proof that resilience can outlast any empire. The story is not over. It continues in every street of Hanoi, every rice field in the Mekong, every tower rising in Ho Chi Minh City. This is Vietnam, a nation forged in struggle, a people unbroken, and a story that will echo through history.